The games you grew up with can kind of be indicative of the type of games you would like today. They can oftentimes act as a precursor for another game later down the line that has similar qualities, and that game ends up being your favorite of all time or something. But what about the games you wanted to play growing up, but never got to? I want you to imagine growing up without a whole library of games that looked baller as hell. Stuff you'd see commercials for all the time on TV, just taunting the fact that you can't play them because you didn't have the means to play them. That was me. The PlayStation 2 is something that everyone, including your grandkids, has heard of. It was the best-selling console of all time. Everyone wanted to get their hands on one of these. Fans of all kinds of genres. It seemed like no matter what kind of games you wanted to play, the PlayStation 2 had something for you. This is the story of how I missed out on what many consider to be the best video game console. And it all started because of a single choice on a certain fateful day. I got my first game system ever at the age of 6, the Game Boy Advance SP. The only game I had on it at the time was Donkey Kong Country. I never beat that game, by the way. I don't know what exactly drew my dad to do this. I guess my dad just felt generous that day and decided to buy my sister and I an actual home console. Now, my parents don't play video games, so I'm assuming the only reason my dad even got the idea to buy any for us was probably just to keep us busy or entertained. Or maybe it was because whenever my parents would take us to Walmart or Best Buy, I would always chill in the video game section just to pass time until they were done. Who knows? Anyways, our actual story starts at Best Buy. Little me is looking at the PS2 games, and I feast my eyes on what would be what I consider my first real video game. You know what I mean, right? The game that made you realize you love video games. For me, that game was Sonic Mega Collection Plus. Let me tell you, this game was such a good start for getting into video games, because as the name implies, it was a bunch of games batched into one. Sure, not all of them are bangers, but it came with Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and most importantly, Sonic 3. And Knuckles. And thus began my long Sonic phase. Is what I would say if I didn't get scammed. So my family's looking at me looking at this video game and they're like, "You want this game?" I'm like, yeah. Then the fucking villain of this story rears his head in. Now, my memory's really foggy on this, so I can only try to draw logical conclusions as to what happened. So, what led my parents away from buying me the PS2 was the specs. Now, my parents don't know shit about technology, and my sister is only 3 years older than me. I doubt my sister would have understood the technical differences without someone regurgitating that info into her. What I'm assuming must have happened was some Best Buy employee saw that we were buying a game that just so happened to be on the Xbox as well, and then decided to sell my parents on the Xbox instead. They probably sold them on some jargon like how the Xbox has built-in memory, so you don't need to bother with memory cards, and it can store up to 8 to 10 gigabytes of data. Wow! Look, I know that this person was probably just trying to do their job. Maybe they had some sort of Xbox quota they had to fulfill, or maybe there was a promotion going on. I don't even know for sure if this hypothetical employee existed. There could very well be a chance that my family made an uneducated decision. But for narrative's sake, I'm gonna stick with the story I made up. It's all that stupid fucking Best Buy employee's fault. Obviously, at the time, I was just a little baby bitch. In fact, I was pretty much new to video games in general. There was a lot of stuff about video games that I just didn't know about. I had no concept of console exclusives at the time. I just figured, hey, does it have the Sonic game? Then I'm good. I had very little understanding of video games in general, so it never occurred to me that I could end up getting barred from a bunch of games I wanted because I didn't have the right rectangular box in my house. And even then, the GameCube had the Sonic Adventure games. So if all I cared about at the time was Sonic, I would have chosen the wrong console either way. Unless I wanted to play Shadow or the Riders games or Unleashed. PS2 did still technically have more Sonic games. But hey, the silver lining was I saved myself from getting the worst version of Sonic Heroes. I guess. Why not just buy both consoles? Or buy the other one later down the line? To that I say, we were poor as fuck, so my parents were definitely not going to be willing to buy a whole nother system for me. Hell, it was hard enough to convince my mom to buy the Wii for my sister when the next generation of consoles rolled by. And just so you know, my sister had way better grades than me, and having good grades was the closest thing to a golden ticket we had. To be clear here, I'm not trying to claim that I grew up miserable because I got the wrong console for me. I still had my Game Boy Advance, and like I said, I eventually got a Wii later down the line. I still got to enjoy a very few select amount of titles on the Xbox. I'm not trying to say Xbox or GameCube didn't have their own exclusives that made them worth it in their own rights. Most of them just didn't really appeal to me. Well, definitely not the Xbox ones. But the point of this video is not to unearth some old petty console war shit. I'm just saying, there's a reason why no one emulates Xbox and everyone emulates PCSX2 and Dolphin. Nah, but really, the real goal of this video is an excuse to play a bunch of PS2 classics for this video and see if I really did miss out, or if maybe the PS2 era is a little over-glamorized. Most of these games I am merely sampling here, but a few of them are ones that I've played to completion long before I even thought about making this video. This is not an all-inclusive list, so don't get mad at me if I didn't include any of your favorites. No major spoilers for any of the games mentioned here, so feel free to just sit back and relax as we go on a journey to recover a stolen part of my childhood. I know the first game to come to people's minds when you bring up the PS2 will vary from person to person, but I'm positive that a good amount of you were thinking of the big three of PS2 action-adventure platformers: Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly Cooper. I wish I played more of these growing up, but the only one I ever really did was Tak 2: The Staff of Dreams. These games definitely feel just like that. Most definitely in the way the movement feels in these games. I don't know what it is about these types of games, but they're extremely easy to pick up and get the hang of. This shit felt like second nature to me within a matter of minutes. At least for Ratchet and Jak. Both games that just happen to have a main character and his fun-sized partner. Although, to be fair, that's a pretty common trope for a lot of games. The fact that these two just happen to be in the same genre, starting in the same console generation, is probably a coincidence, right? That's not to say they're exactly the same. I can't go into too much detail about the specifics between them, because I'm merely sampling them at the moment. And also, this is a genre that's not really my expertise. Sly Cooper being the most different of the three. It's obviously a lot more stealth-oriented, being about a thief, and follows a much more straightforward, clear enough stages to move on to the next area formula. Jak goes by an objective-based collect-a-thon formula, where you collect power cells by finding them, uncovering them, or as rewards for helping NPCs. Believe it or not, the most crucial difference between these games for me is the way each game handles health. In Ratchet, it's 5 hits and you're dead, a pretty comfortable amount, and they give you plenty of health units throughout the stage to recover if you suck at the game like I do. Jak gives you 3 hits, but the way you recover health is by collecting 50 or more green glowies. In Sly, it's 1 hit and you're dead, unless you grab a lucky charm, which gives you an extra hit. As you can imagine, Sly was the game I sucked at the most because I'm bad at not getting hit, and I'm bad at stealth. The cartoony style and the expressiveness of these characters easily makes them stand out to me, and I can see why these characters are so iconic. I especially love the animation that plays every time you get a power cell in Jak, and the animated cutscenes in Sly. These games definitely embody what made me enjoy Tak. Or maybe that's backwards, I don't know. And I can easily see myself sinking a lot of time into these games if I played these growing up. Alright, so before I bang my head against the wall trying to write about games I don't fully quite grasp yet, let's spend a hot minute in my territory, turn-based RPGs. So, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up with my GBA, and one of the games I played to death on that thing was Pokemon Blue version. This is kinda what planted the seed for me enjoying turn-based combat. But I wouldn't quite come to love the genre as a whole until playing the Final Fantasy games, of which quite a few of them were on GBA. All the classic games from 1 through 6 were on there. Except for 3, I still don't understand that. Now, when it comes to Final Fantasy games that are must-plays, some people will tell you 7, I would personally tell you 4, however, a very common one people will tell you is a must-play is Final Fantasy X. A largely important factor for an RPG is an immersive world. And what better way to immerse the player than having the player experience the same thing Tidus is going through? Yes, I know the proper term for that is called an isekai, but this is better than those ones, okay? The way you're just thrown into Spira, all alone, with nothing but your sword to protect you. And the game really does not tell you much about the world at the very beginning, like a lot of isekai stories tend to do. Dude, there's even a whole-ass language they made up just for this game, just to make you feel even more estranged to this place, even after finding other humans. You are truly in the exact know-how as Tidus, and you learn things in a very natural way over the course of the story. Not only that, but you also get to hear Tidus' thoughts through his monologues as he takes it all in. The environments alone in this game are enough to sell me on this world though. Blah blah era of games with too much water, something something. Bruh, before this game and Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, the best water exploration we had was Mario and Zelda on the N64. Emphasizing the clean aquamarine beach coasts at the beginning of the game was genius. It may not look like much by today's standards, but for one of the earliest PS2 titles, this shit must have looked like real life back then.
And they somehow managed to compress this down all to a single DVD. Damn, not even the PlayStation 5 can do that.
That's not even getting into the turn-based combat of the game. It's aged pretty damn well, and the sphere grid system can allow for some pretty flexible character building once you get deep into it. Sadly, that doesn't really happen until you're far into the game without grinding. Still though, the grid gives you a very satisfying sense of growth and progression, which is another pretty integral part for any RPG. Speaking of battles and character builds, let me tell you about a game I didn't know I needed until recently. For context, the only Dragon Quest game I've beaten is the first one. To be honest, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in this case. Dragon Quest VIII is about as close to a classic by-the-books RPG adventure as you can get for a 2000s game. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes all you need is a nice large overworld, some cool looking character designs, and a nice straightforward battle system. A really neat thing about this game is that while you have an option to input commands directly, you can also set them to some really good AI settings. This shit does more than just the bare minimum, it's made with all the mechanics in mind. So this game has this thing called a rev up, which lets you stack attack buffs until you reach the limit, and then unleash a powerful attack. Not only can you tell the AI to do that, but it'll know when it's enough to kill the enemy, so they don't rev up more than they need to. You also have other specific tactics like show no mercy, or focus on healing, but for most random encounters you can leave them on fight wisely. The combat is simple, but the actual intricacies behind stuff like your character's proficiencies adds a layer of customization to each character. Every character has their own skills exclusive to them, but which skills you want to focus on and build them towards is entirely up to you. Characters each have 3 different weapon types to choose from, and skills tied to their proficiency in said weapon. Each weapon has their own perks, the first one usually being the most standard and basic, with the other 2 hitting multiple enemies at once, or having some kind of other benefit or trade-off. When it comes to RPGs, speccing variety is probably my favorite part. At least on the gameplay side of things. Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, two big pillars of the JRPG genre. I wonder, if there were a big three for this genre too, what could the third one possibly be? Hey, allow me to introduce myself. I'm
Name and address withheld.
And I've made videos on almost all of the Megami Tensei games on PS2 except for the Devil Summoner Raido duology. Because of that, I'm not going to go too into detail on what these games individually excel with. What I will say they all uniformly do well is take you away with their atmosphere. Whether it be a desolate and lonely atmosphere of an abandoned hospital, or the ruins of a war zone that used to be something. And one thing's for certain, 9 times out of 10, no matter where you are, you will never feel safe. Oh hey, Dante's in this game. Well, I guess now's a better time than any to bring up. Anyone who's familiar with my channel probably knows this already, but I'm kind of obsessed with Persona 3. And no, I'm not just talking about the recent remake that came out. Persona, along with Kingdom Hearts, are basically the games of my college years. Where do I even begin with this one? I already made a massive video going into excruciating detail about what this game did to stand out and why it clicked with me so much. If I had to put it in the shortest way possible, Persona 3 does the most with the least. It's a game with not as many resources as the previous Megaten games mentioned, yet it still manages to accomplish so much with the small number of environments that you'll be revisiting throughout the entire game, some randomized dungeons, and a really addicting battle system. It's pretty easy to dismiss this stuff on a surface level, but the closer I look at this game, the more I learn how cleverly designed so many things in this game actually are. An equipment choice can determine how you approach an enemy, both in and out of battle. A simple alteration in architecture can give the player a choice to either charge into enemies or avoid them. Your limited stamina will make the player consider how they balance gaining XP versus reserving enough stamina to reach the next checkpoint. Your allies being AI-based actually adds a layer of strategy in of itself. Just like Dragon Quest VIII, knowing what context each tactic setting works best in, what actions fall under what tactic, and what circumstance or exception a character will choose to do or not do a certain action is a whole other realm of strategy outside of just, what do I make the guy do? It's not like you can't account for enemies disrupting your strategy. The game gives you a turn chart, so you can plan and assign orders accordingly. Putting this game under a microscope reveals a whole web of decision-making that intertwines with all the other mechanics that work off each other, and you can tell it was very deliberate. Hey, remember back when stories were allowed to be slow-paced? Stories like this tend to be really slow at the beginning, but slowly ramp up and snowball until the end of the game, where the most climactic shit happens. You might say it's backloaded, but to that I say, the game is more than just its story. It's also your life, and in order to facilitate that, it needs to feel like you have a life outside of the main story and your dungeon excursions. And above all, I'd say Persona 3 is more about its characters wrestling with the themes of the game. The passage of time is crucial to do that. It can get repetitive, of course, but you know, even repetitious gameplay can be fun and addicting sometimes. A big factor of addiction is repetition and routine habit. Obviously, little 9 to 10-year-old me in 2007 when the game first came out in the West was too young to play it, but I'm sure my high school self would have really appreciated it. My family was very limited when it came to buying games, so when I got a new game, I had to make it last. I'd squeeze as much as I could out of one of them. For an 80-ish hour game with a lot of room to learn and optimize every subsequent playthrough, it would have definitely made up for my huge deficit of games growing up. Admittedly though, it's probably better that I experienced this game for the first time right when I did. I was way more social in my college years, and I had a car, so I definitely had more freedom to go out with friends more and relate to the lifestyle of Persona 3. Especially the getting tired from studying or staying out late. College students are always tired and shit. Persona 4 is also a game that came out about a year or two after. While it does still retain qualities of Persona 3 and even improves in some aspects, I do feel like it was a little too sanitized. All of the small but frequent decision making that juxtapose the surface level simplicity is gone, and now all you're left with is the simplicity. You go from these simple but compact labyrinths to long stretches of hallways. No pillars or arches to evade or juke enemies. Your best choice is honestly to just run straight first into enemies. This is also reflected in the game's combat. Everything feels more on the fly and just wing it type beat. Again, I made a whole long-ass video going into more detail on that, and I don't want to spend too much time on it here. The last thing I'll say is, Dragon Quest VIII was allowed to have direct control and good AI settings. Why couldn't this game? Alrighty, let's see what's next here. Hack and slashers, alright. There are really only two that I care enough to play or talk about, and you should already be able to guess where I'm about to begin. Alright, no more dilly-dallying, it's time to finally address... I know this is still technically a JRPG, but what do you spend most of the game doing? No, not spamming X, you fool. I hate when people say that. You might be able to get away with it on lower difficulties, but the best way to play Kingdom Hearts is on the hardest difficulty. Not necessarily saying level 1, I don't count that as its own difficulty, as it's usually locked behind the hardest setting anyway. Although it can be a very fulfilling challenge. In Kingdom Hearts 2 at least. Kingdom Hearts 1 at level 1 is absolute ass. And wasn't even in the PS2 version, so I don't even know why I'm bringing it up here. Kingdom Hearts is a really charming hodgepodge of all the good qualities I've mentioned from the previous games, except SMT. You've got your crystal beaches, your water exploration, and the story of a boy getting torn away from his world just like FF10. You've got some awkward platforming, but great exploration design. You know that thing some games do where they put an item in a place that's clearly visible but just out of reach, but then you come back later with a new ability or gadget to finally reach said thing? So satisfying. Unlike normal hack and slash games that require button combos for different sword techniques, these are just equipped to Sora as abilities. Combo modifiers are context-sensitive swinging maneuvers. Some of them are gonna be your starting or second hit, while others are gonna be your combo finishers. Some of them close the gap between you and the enemy, some of them add a quick hit to your combo, and some of them just deal big damage. This isn't even taking into account magic, passive abilities, or limits, which are a whole other can of worms that I can't be bothered to talk about right now. Truthfully speaking though, even if I did play these games growing up, there were still things that I would inevitably missed out on no matter what. We didn't officially get any Final Mix content in the West until the games were remastered for PS3 and 4. English patches for the original Final Mix games, as far as I knew, could only be emulated, and most people back in the day didn't have a computer that could emulate PS2 games. At least I didn't. Gameplay aside, I know for a fact that kid me would have totally clicked with this game. You know when you get around that age when your peers want to act more mature, so they outgrow watching Disney and other kids' cartoons in favor of adult comedy shows like Family Guy or South Park. Then there was me, a kid who wasn't really into adult comedy shows or really understood their humor. I was a really innocent kid, okay? But also a kid who was starting to question if they were too old to still be enjoying kid stuff. I think that's a huge part of the appeal for Kingdom Hearts. at least for me, just reading the manga. Kingdom Hearts took Disney franchises, sprinkled a little bit of Final Fantasy in for some of that teenage angst, and told a mature story with them, discovering the dark and sinister side of a world that contradicts the more innocent perception you had of it, shaped by the lighthearted films and media you consumed as a kid. Part of growing up is being introduced to more mature and challenging concepts through media that was made for kids. At least for the PS2 games. The further you go into this series, the more it starts to sound hokey. Damn, do I even still care about this series in its current state right now? Huh. Well, enough of this childish Disney crap. Let's talk about a real hack and slash game for the real big kids. I'm gonna be straight here. This one has absolutely nothing to do with my childhood. I just really wanted an excuse to play it. For the longest time, Devil May Cry was kinda just a meme to me. I only really knew DMC from the many pictures of Virgil's face people like to post on the internet, and SMT3 Nocturne, featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series! Getting to actually experience the game Dante came from for the first time almost felt like actually playing the Kingdom Hearts games after only reading the manga. The first room in the game is honestly just perfect. The first door you need to get through to progress requires you to gather exactly 45 red orbs, and there are exactly 45 in that room. The music here really sets a tense atmosphere. And this room also allows the player to adjust themselves to the controls and the fixed camera angles, as they're basically required to explore the entire room from top to bottom to reach the prerequisite and continue. You ever get tired of hearing people say style over substance? Well, this game is all about style. Whenever you pick up an item, the game plays a quick but clean as fuck animation where the item spins and twirls towards you. Dude, a fucking animation plays whenever you equip a weapon. They did not need to do that, but I love that they did. I didn't really care too much about optimizing my style rankings since this is just my first playthrough, but the encouragement to keep your combos going as long as possible is honestly just so ostentatious. Like, fuck just killing the enemy, you gotta look fly while you do it. I really didn't, because I'm not great at the game. One thing that remained consistent throughout my entire first play session was the feeling of danger. There's this part where the bridge below you collapses, you fall into the water, and your health immediately starts going down gradually. You have to fight your way out of there before Dante fucking drowns. That segment wasn't even that hard, and I got out of it well before losing even like 10% of my health. In fact, looking back at my footage, it was pretty underwhelming. But the sheer realization in the moment of what was happening was enough to get me on my toes. Literally the start of every boss fight had me going, oh shit! The first filter, according to my friends at least, was some volcanic spider guy. I don't know. I turned the subtitles off at the beginning of the game thinking I'd be fine, but I couldn't understand a word he was saying.
Big surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours.
So, Guy took me like 4 attempts and the bastard used up all my yellow orbs. I eventually beat him and I finally get to move on to the next mission.
Are you fucking kidding me?
And then he just disappears as soon as you go through a door. Dick? Bro, you want the coolest fucking introduction to a rival? This sent chills down my spine. Dude snaps his fingers, opens the doors, and gestures at you to come out and duel him. That is as far as I got, unfortunately, because after I died on my first attempt, I paused the recording because I had to restart the mission. But I forgot to unpause the recording when I actually beat him on my second attempt. I got pissed and stopped because I hate messing up recordings, and the game doesn't let you replay stages until you start a new file or begin a new cycle. I think now's a good time to chill out and play some relaxing games. It's no secret that the PS2 is also home to some of the most charismatically weird games in all of gaming, Katamari Damacy being probably the most exemplary instance. What is even happening here, dude? We gotta roll up garbage to create stars and shit? I mean, okay. This game is quite satisfying though. You know when you were a kid and you loved setting up a bunch of household objects and toys just to knock them all down? No? Oh, okay. Well, it's kinda like that. So I imagine kid me having a ball. Oh god, no pun intended, I swear! Katamari also probably has one of the most contagiously catchy soundtracks I've ever heard. Ape Escape 2 is one that I often hear people meme about, probably because any game about monkeys is just objectively memeable. This is also the game that I admittedly spent the most time on out of the weird games category. What can I say? Chasing around monkeys and catching them is just addictive by nature. Playing around and learning how all the gadgets worked is fun, and with the number of different gadgets they gave me within just the first 2 hours, the gameplay isn't going to get stale anytime soon. I played this game for 2.5 hours just to say, yeah, it's peak. Those things aren't even the best parts of this game to me. The voice actors for these characters are Ash and Misty from Pokemon.
Next, let's try some deep sea diving. What? Why me? Because you mess things up! Get moving! I'll do it! Unbelievable.
I'm literally catching them all with Ash, not Pikachu, and Misty. It really is just like my childhood. Dude, this game even has water. It really is like Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Okay, last one for this video. I don't know how many of you have heard of this one. I know I didn't know about it until I watched this video by Ruby Falls, but just the concept of the game alone kinda had me sold. So the game starts off with, so this tree has the power vested in him to marry you with this random girl who he claims to be your true love. You kiss, but then you wake up in the back of your dad's truck moving into your new place. You walk around the neighborhood and you run into the exact same girl you saw in your dream. Obviously, if you try to kiss her, she slaps the shit out of you because you just met her. But also because you're inexperienced at kissing, I guess. So now you must learn to befriend people in your neighborhood so that you can kiss them, and level up your heart to the point where you will eventually be able to kiss the girl of your dreams. That sounds nice and all, but I couldn't even do that because I spent most of my time getting lost around town. It was through this, however, that I discovered how endearingly wacky this game is. There's an underground civilization of mole people, and you can observe them by looking into holes on the ground. The only laws in this town are keep your clothes on, don't smoke, and don't steal. If you go out at night, the cop will be patrolling with this creepy flashlight eyes and will shoot you on sight if he sees you. I mean, I guess that's permissible since it's not against the rules. Oh, and if you try to go into areas you're not supposed to be in yet, this telephone pole guy will stop you and kick you in the balls. He even comes in to kick you while you're down on the game over screen. What a shithead. Now, You might be wondering, is this really a game that I would have asked my parents to buy for me as a kid? Probably not. I wasn't based or cultured enough to really appreciate weird shit like this. It does, however, give off the vibe of a game a relative would have given me instead of the one I wanted because it was cheap. So I'm counting it. Also subscribe if you love this video, and support me on Patreon if you really love my content. It costs as little as $1. You get in-depth updates on my videos and even some sneak preview content on occasion. I know this type of video is different from what I usually do, but if you watched all the way to the end, thank you for watching. Okay, the final verdict. Would I have enjoyed playing the PS2 more than the Xbox? Hell yeah! That shit was awesome! I don't know if I would have been smart enough to beat half of those games as a kid, but that was kinda like most games for me already. Only middle or high school me was really capable of finishing games, usually with the help of the internet. Regardless, I'm not too beaten up over not being able to experience the joy of these games during my childhood. In this day and age, I have the luxury of being able to emulate these games in HD widescreen. It's how I recorded all the games here, save for DMC. Right now, I'm still young, or rather, I'm not ancient yet, so I've still got plenty of years left to fill that PS2-shaped hole in my heart. At the end of the day, me not playing these games back then doesn't change at all how much I enjoyed playing them for this video. I know I was hard on you, Mr. or Miss Best Buy employee, but for all that it's worth, I forgive you. I guess the real lesson we all learned today is, thank God for piracy.